The Strengthening Communities podcast is brought to you by Access Services. Join us as we talk with Tricia Malott, a former Access employee and county partner with an impactful history alongside our organization.
Well, welcome to the podcast, guys. This is another episode in our 50th anniversary year here at Access. And so this year we want to just feature guests who can talk to us about sort of the impact stories, the ways that Access over the decades has made an impact on the community. Our goal, our motto, our mission is to strengthen communities. And so that happens in a bunch of different ways, but some of that has just happened over 50 years and providing services to folks while they're living in the community and helping them just be full members of the communities of their choice. And so we're excited to, Mike, it's good to see you again. It's been a little bit more than a month, but it's always good to be back with you. And Tricia, it's good to see you here with us. Tricia and I have gone back. We were talking about it. This has been over 40 years that we've bumped into each other in one way or another. And one of the cool things about you, Tricia, is that you have this relationship with Access that has had different chapters and different ways that you've been connected with Access over the years. So in the early days, you worked for the county and for other service providers. And so we crossed paths because we were an organization trying to help people. And you were part of the service system that was also trying to help people. And so we got together over some of those folks that were challenging to serve. And then you became part of Access. And then, we'll get into those different chapters. And then you're also a member of the community. And so you have some experience with just how services have been provided in the community. So you're like you have it all in this as a guest in terms of the experience, different Access in different ways. And so we're really excited to have you with us today. So why don't we just talk about those early days when you were a part of the county system and how we got connected or how our paths crossed and what that was about.
First off, I had worked, at Centerpoint Training Center and knew Access then. We had come alongside and served some of the same people and had those cool, experiences. And that was back in the day. That was 1982. So that's 40, do the math, right? That's like 44 years ago that I first...
I would, except I can't, but I think you got it.
I did the math before this podcast.
Okay, good.
So yeah, because I'm thinking, gosh, it's been four decades. And I kind of got emotional just thinking about it. But so I had known about Access, and then I went from Centerpoint and I started working for the county. And at that point, I was working on the developmental disability side. Molly France was the administrator, and my very first time I met you and Rob was, it's like a Tuesday afternoon, and a family came to the county office. Older parents, I think they were like probably in their early 90s, and they had a son with a developmental delay, and he needed services, but they just weren't able to find residential care. They were getting older and they had nowhere to turn really. So they took, it was at 1 Montgomery Plaza at the time, and they brought their son to 1 Montgomery Plaza and came to the desk. And I remember Mary Doherty calling me and saying, can you come out and greet this family? And they were like, we gotta leave them here. Like we can't serve, we can't, we have no place else to turn. So I remember going into Molly France's office and saying, what do we do? And and I remember at the time she said, it wasn't even Access Services. It was like, well, can you give Mark Borson, Rob Reed a call? And I did. And so this gentleman went to, for a brief period of time, went to RHD at the time, had a respite house in Norristown. This was way back in the 80s. And I met, and you and Rob came out that afternoon. And I remember you walking down the stairs, meeting you, and it was just like this it was just a good feeling to know that you were so responsive, and you were just like, okay, let's figure this out. It was always let's figure this out together. But we're here to help, and we can figure it out with you. And from that day, that was in the early 80s. From that day until present day, that's been really, I think, your motto is let's figure this out together. I went from adult services to being a CAST coordinator, and that was really overseeing children's services in Montgomery County. And we had, at the time, CAST was like very new. It was a national model, and it was a model that sort of embodied some core values, which was like being child focused, family centered, community based, and that was sort of the lingo or the core values at the time. But no one really knew what that looked like exactly. But Access, so from day one, that sort of philosophy that you all had about serving children and families was with that respect, listening to people, honoring their strengths, just supporting people's choices, just doing that common sense kinds of things made you such an effective partner. So when managed care came in, that was in July 1995, it was a big deal. And it was all about the medical model and all about, looking at like treating, getting help from looking at a person's problems from the inside. And Access was really one of those agencies. It was the agency, actually. And it was the work that you and I did, Mark, that you, I think, helped the county have a voice in that and help the county say, you know what, we've been coming along with Access and we've been helping people in a certain way. And we've been helping people by listening and honoring their choices and just thinking about what a good life looks like for them. And that's what we want to keep doing. But if you remember, Mark, it was a challenge because you had to sort of fit that common sense thinking into this new structure of managed care.
Yeah. So I remember a story from that moment where there was a young man who had been living in a residential treatment facility for a long time, number of years, and we helped him go back home. But something had changed in his family during that moment where his mom wasn't at home the way she had been. And so all of a sudden, he was a teenager. He had some mental health issues, but he also had an intellectual disability. And everybody was saying, how can this young man go back home with only his father at home? And the dad worked long hours. He was like a CPA or something, and he just worked really long hours. He said, I don't know how to do this. I don't think I can do this. And so we enlisted the help of the next door neighbor who was a retired teacher. And she was just one of those, older grandmotherly types that took care of everybody in the neighborhood. And we just said, can he stop by when he comes home? He was a latchkey kid. When he came home from school, can he come over here, get a snack? Maybe you help him with his homework for a couple minutes. And then we helped him get a job at McDonald's right down the street. So then all of a sudden he was connected to his community in a way that services really weren't actually providing. This was the community responding, and we were just sort of the navigators along with that. But the reason I'm saying that is because we had to write a treatment plan, and we wrote the grandmother into the treatment plan, and the people who were approving this managed care treatment plan called us up and said, we're not paying for that. You can't put a grandmother. That's not a service. There's no code for that. And we're like, yeah, we know that, but this whole thing doesn't work without the grandmother. And so we're just putting it in here so just everybody knows that the grandmother next door is critical to this whole thing working. And our staff were providing. We had wraparound staff. We had behavior specialists and a therapist. They were all involved in this. But the thing that made it work was this thing that we had learned to do, which is how do you get people back into the community, and how do you enlist the community to help them. But it was like we were speaking a foreign language when we were talking to managed care about that.
And that was tough oftentimes getting to that middle ground. But I feel like those discussions and your thinking about, and I know talking about history, okay, if we're going back to like Access Services in the 50 years, you really got your start on the developmental disability side when there was, the person-centered planning concepts were, really, really at the forefront. And I think you sort of align those person-centered planning concepts and just your common sense concepts of respect and choice and control and listening and honoring, those concepts that we talked about really now are what we call, like, we have names, like now we call it like trauma informed and recovery. And you were doing, Access was doing all of that literally back in the 80s before it was even called anything.
Yeah, I think that's something, and I'm glad we're talking about how challenging that is to be in those rooms to say it, because sometimes it is, you're looked at like the person with the rainbows and unicorns idea, and you have these lenses that you're viewing people as though they should be able to make their own decisions and empower them to use their natural supports. And on the other side, that can be a little scary for people who are looking to control, like, how do we create a plan around this? Like that's not really certain that the neighbor will be able to do this long term. But having the capacity to involve the family in those conversations, I think my experience at Access has been that where there's a lot of places where conversations were happening without the people in the room. And we've invited them in the room and said, how do we empower you to have a voice with your own treatment, your own plan, your own future? And how do we give you some control of your self-determination here, and how are we going to move in a direction that's important to you? Because if you're not here for us to ask those questions, then we're creating a plan that we think might work best for you, but we really don't have all the information. So I'm glad to be a part of those conversations in the past, and I'm glad that they are a lot easier to have now. And I'm curious if we see kind of in this strengthening communities, because back then I don't think we believed that was, I believe we knew it was the right thing to do. We knew it was the right way to go about caring well for people. But I don't feel like there was necessarily like a movement that we said, we're going to join this movement together to care well for people. So I think about that now in terms of spaces that I'm entering, where what's the next step? What's the thing we're involved in now that isn't quite a movement, but we recognize the capacity for improvement and change. And we're kind of moving the needle on that a little bit. So just a question to both of you guys, like if you see kind of the next step for moving the needle or helping people's capacity to live successful, fulfilling lives, like what that might be now.
When you're saying that, I think it goes back to what Tricia was saying. I think we started by being super clear on what we believe to be true about people. Like, we believe that people should be deciding what they're doing. And we believe that people have much more capacity to do that than sometimes they're given credit for. Even young people, and maybe particularly young people, because a lot of times they get left out. And that when we have a problem, the solution is a shared solution, rather than saying it, there's got to be a service for that, or a technique, a treatment modality or something for that. So when I think back on some of those things, I think what happened functionally, like what happened in a meeting, was we would say, is everybody who should be in the meeting here? and then how do we elevate the voices of the people in a room who need to speak? So and I will say, Tricia, you and I ended up in all of these meetings with, people that were, the teams were struggling to serve, things had been tried and weren't working. And then it would be, well, Mark's going to come and somehow that's going to make it all right, which is a huge amount of pressure because I don't know. I don't know much of anything, and I didn't have an answer. And so I would walk in a room like, I hope something comes out of this. So, but often, so what did come out were those basic things. Like if you stayed true to the values that actually work, something pretty amazing that you couldn't have predicted would come out. And so while you were saying that, Mike, I was just thinking of, there were times when we would go into a meeting and we would just sort of announce, this is so-and-so's, the person the focus person, the person we're meeting around. I remember going into there had been a lot of tension and a lot of emotions were running high. And I went into the meeting and sat next to the young person on purpose. Like it was me and this young person across the table from everybody else. And I wanted that person to just physically, I wanted to communicate to the room, this is really pretty important. And I remember there was another one, Tricia, there was a kid in a school system and he had a best friend and who was like 10 years old. They were both 10 years old. And we said, can we invite his friend? So this is a school setting with an IEP, with legal, like the whole bureaucracy that goes with it. And we wanted permission for this guy to bring his buddy into this meeting that had legal ramifications, but they let us. And we were talking about how this young man needed to have connections in his community. And we were trying to figure out ways for it to happen. And his buddy says, like, I don't know, but I got a bike route, like a newspaper route on my bike. And I can get him one if that's not hard. I can get him. And so they ended up having a newspaper route together. And it happened because we had no answers, but the buddy did. And so what we were doing was just making sure that the process respected the things that we knew to be true. And honestly, I think one of the reasons that we were successful in those days is because we worked with people that nobody had an answer for. And so they were willing to give us some latitude and do something weird to them, because there wasn't, that people had sort of run out of road. They weren't sure what to do. So to your point, Mike, I don't know if there's a movement right now, but I think there is. I think recovery movements are the peer movement. Those are the places that I think there's a lot of these same values come out in those current spaces. A lot of the way the community is just responding, like they understand mental health differently than they did years ago. And so I think there are places for those values to live and breathe.
I just remember, like, sort of back in the day, there was like this, like Mark would call it, like this inherent tension, because whether it was a school meeting or at the time it was ABH, right? Remember ABH?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or a managed care meeting, it was always sort of the school or the managed care organization wanting to have that control. And Mark, and a lot of it was about these really great, good core values that Mark would bring. And you would always talk about like your compass, right? And like the compass, where's your compass? Like it's got to always be, that northern point. But you would also have an eye on outcomes, right? And I remember you saying our outcome, what is our outcome here? And you always would say families, well, this is on the children's side, families will feel in charge and competent about taking care of their kids. And so that you would sort of like put that out there. And then you would ask the question, and I use this to this day, even in my own family and in my personal, you would, and it's so pure. And you would say, okay, what would things look like if they were good? And let's just talk about that. How would things look? And you would get people to sort of envision the life and the relationships and the meaning and the support that they they dream of. And you would take time in meetings to do that. And that was super cool. That was just super cool. But I think going back to just quickly, because we had meetings with a lot of schools, and we were in schools a lot where, there was a big focus on the school, they're kind of in charge and we have to follow this process. They felt uncomfortable with sort of giving that control over to the child and the family. But that's where the magic was. And that's what you always knew. And that's the work that you always sort of promoted. And then I remember over time, those assistant superintendents, those directors of special education, those directors of special ed and student services, they'd say, we would like to have Mark Borst at this meeting. Then you were getting the calls because they knew that the work that you were doing helped, even though it made them feel uncomfortable.
There was a case where a young woman, she was 14, and she kept running away. She kept running away from residential treatment, and they were trying to figure out where to send her next. And so they were going to send her really far away, with the idea that it would be too far away from home for her to run away. And the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of times there really wasn't a clear answer, and it was just a matter of asking questions. And I remember saying, do you think she's running away from something, or is she running to something? And it turned out she was running to her mother, who was homeless at the time. She was looking for her, and I didn't know the answer to that. But it shifted the conversation then, because it turned out she wasn't running away. Everybody was assuming that she was running away from wherever she was, and she was really trying to run back to her mom, because wherever she was, it wasn't right for her. So I think there's a lot of good happens when we just sort of throw out the hardware a little bit and just ask really good human questions about what's going on in this situation, and inviting people to talk to us about what their experience is, because what their experience is really plays into, what's going on with them, why they're doing what they're doing, and giving them voice their experience and a little bit of control about what they want to do next is really important.
When I think about access, what I think about is your focus, your compass is really building supports around people's lives. So it's that, and we all have unique lives, right? Everyone has uniqueness to their existence and wants and needs and relationships and all kinds of things. And it's not about continuum of services. It's not about that. It's about really coming alongside, digging in that hole with that family, that child, that individual, and understanding who they are, and then what they need, and then building those supports and resources around that person. And Access has always been that agency, always. From my tenure with Access, you were never following the dollar or following the next best thing. Access always kept their intentions and their focus really, really pure. And that's the specialness of Access. I just, it's been, for me, it's been such a privilege and an honor to be a part of that philosophy. It just has. It's been really important. And even in my own life, right? So I feel like, well, I don't know if I worked for Access for a period of time too.
Yeah, so talk about that, because that's a good segue right there, because you wanted to be part of the philosophy. How better to do that than just join us, right? So that happened.
Exactly. So so I, was working at the county office and left the county office and did something else for a period of time, and then I remember there was a position open at Access, and you were starting, it was adult, it was taking respite that you had been in the respite care business for many, many years, serving youth. And then you were looking at serving adults. And you called on me to be the coordinator of that service. And we called it, remember, you named it. It was called Take 5. Take a break from mental illness, essentially. People needed breaks from their families. Families needed to breaks from their loved ones. And we set the program up the same way that respite care was set up on the youth side, where you had host families, and they would host an individual that wanted to take a break for a weekend, or sometimes it was even a week. And it was such a great concept. And what ended up happening is, I remember going to Central Behavioral Health. I was doing some marketing, and I was sitting there and I was meeting with a group of people at Central, talking about Take 5 and talking about this opportunity to have respite, and it'd be a wonderful thing. And that day I came away with like 25 applications. I had, like, in my briefcase, I had 20, and I remember coming back to the office and saying, Lori, I've got 25 people that want respite. How are we going to do this?
And the other thing that was really cool about this, and so the thing I like about this part of our development as an organization was, this was before peer support became a thing. So Mike, you were saying, like, what's the next movement? So this was before peer support really became an understood thing, or actually even a thing. And what we said was, number one, people need a break, and so they don't have one. The only thing that happens is they just try to hang on until something happens, they have a crisis, and then they end up with more treatment rather than just sort of being able to find natural kinds of things in their life the way other people have. And so we wanted to help the community fill that space. And so one of the things that was remarkable to me was, some of it was like even just an activity or a day. You could spend a day with somebody. And we had a bunch of people. So Tricia started getting all these people who wanted to be interested. And we discovered that there were people who, they didn't want to say, hey, I want some respite. They said, I want to be a respite provider. And so they said, I want to help somebody else. And they were helping themselves, but they really were looking for a way to participate in the community, participate with other people that wasn't in the middle of a treatment system. It was just sort of, this is how people live. But they wanted to be helpers. They wanted to offer something. They wanted the purpose of that. And so we had a little bit of a hard time saying, well, who's the helper, who's the helpee? And it was really just, this is mutual support. And one of those, it still sticks out because I still talk to one of the guys. There was a guy who wanted to go to a concert, and he couldn't figure out how to go to a concert. And so this other guy said, oh, I love music. I go to concerts. We can go together. And Access paid for the tickets and the transportation and the meal. Like, they just set it up so that they could go do this thing. And out of that, the guy who was taking the other guy, the guy who loved music, also played the guitar. And so out of this time together, this concert, they decided that the one guy was going to give the other guy guitar lessons. And that didn't have anything to do with us. It's just because they met and they had a relationship. And the one guy said, I would love to teach this other guy, how to play the guitar. And so they started doing that on their own. And it didn't have anything to do with a service at all. It was us just getting people together and letting sort of the normal things of support and relationship sort of take over.
Yeah, it was helping people. Like, I always think about this, and it's experience your experience. And it was just giving people, both the person who was served and the person who was, like, for example, I'm thinking about so many host families that signed up to do respite. It was such a great experience all the way around. And I think the important thing, like what you're talking about, is just creating those opportunities just for connection and then seeing what happened, and we would just make these matches, and then we would just kind of, let it happen, however it happened.
I was just going to say that I think it's so valuable. I've seen people put so much work into something where I'm like, it's make the connection. We don't have to plan it all out. They're going to figure it out, but we're just doing the introduction, and then we're going to allow people to go through their own, because you're right. Like, you guys are hitting it on the head. It's not this, I'm the helper or the person being helped. It's, and Mark and I have talked on this podcast many times about, the amount of purpose I've found in life. And one of the reasons why I want word to get out to communities that we serve, so that people who are not connected directly to any behavioral health or mental health supports can get the same kind of purpose and fulfillment that I've found in this work that I've received from the people that we've served, but have also just enriched my life. Because I know there's people that are not directly connected to some of the circles that we're in that don't get the exposure to some of the real value that the individuals in our programs have. And trying to find ways, because sometimes it is, they just, if you're in another line of work or life and you don't have exposure to the kind of field that we've been a part of for this many years, I would love to find a way we could just introduce people to it. Like, just to, because we know how great it is. Like, how do we get people more connected in their communities to get out of it what we've gotten? So that's what's on my mind as we have these conversations.
Yeah, that's a great, thought, and it'd be fun to, I just remember Mark, back in the day, you'd have these like think tanks, where people would come together and you just talk about great ideas, and that's a great idea, and the magic that happens in that connection. Just it's pure. It is magic. And so that brings me to the point. So Dave Ecker, and we always laugh about this. Before I worked for Access Services, and I was on the county side and seeing the good work that Access did, but didn't really. We knew that it was all about like, connections and relationships and listening to people, all those good things. But I would say to Dave, like, I can't wait to come work for Access because I want to see what the pixie dust is all about. Like, there's pixie dust over there at Access. And then when I came to work for Access, what I realized is the pixie dust is really humanity and really just treating people with respect and listening and honoring their choices and giving them choices. And that was cool. So it was really cool for me to actually then go to actually work for Access, for that period of time and developing that program and meeting all kinds. It was a great experience meeting all kinds of people.
On our side of that, there was, first of all, we said, this is about connections, and we just want to, and we're going to try a thing. There isn't a service like this. We're just going to try it and see what happens. But really, we're going to base it on the fact that everybody has a gift, everybody has something to offer, and the connections are really the most important thing. And we said about Tricia, she's a great matchmaker. Like this is why we want Tricia, is because she is a great matchmaker, and that's all we want. This person just has to bring people together and say, you too, you should talk. It'll be great, right? So there was that, and then the other thing that was sort of a part of this, our value system of this, was we weren't basing, this is in the mental health system, but it has nothing to do with mental health or treatment. We're basing this on the hospitality industry. And so we said to the host, you're a host. You're going to have a guest in your house. How do you make people, when your family comes or somebody comes that you know and you've invited, how do you make them feel comfortable? That's the hospitality industry. And that's how we're approaching this. And we would talk to people. How do you be a guest? Like, you're going to go to somebody's place. How do you be a guest in their place? It's less about, what's going on in your life that that you need a break from. Just like you're going to a place, it'll be great. You're going to meet new people, and what does it mean to be a host, and what does it mean to be a guest? And we're really emphasizing on just what that connection is going to be, and that spilled out into some of the other things that we did, as part of Starting Point, where we help people get connected with other people because they needed a place to live. Like, how can they live? How can we do a house sharing arrangement or something like that? It's really about just helping people be connected in ways that make sense to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's shift over to the last sort of part of this. Like, you were in a system and we were partnered with you. We were good friends with you, but we partnered through a service provider and a system. And then you came to join us and help us make a little magic for a while. But you've also experienced this as a person in the community. And why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've had the privilege of really experiencing Access in so many different ways and on so many different levels. So I admired Access for the longest time, and then it was my turn to be a recipient of services, and Access came to my family's aid at a real difficult time, and I got to experience what that felt like and what that looked like. And it felt and looked kind of like everything that we're talking about. From my very first call to Mobile Crisis, it was a sense of like welcoming. You know what I mean? It was that sense of like calmness and kindness. And so throughout the whole process of me, getting support from Access, I felt like very respected and very supported and very safe. And it was very it felt natural. It felt like this natural growing experience in a difficult time. So I felt grateful. I felt really, really grateful to have to be in that side of being the person who was getting that help. Full circle moment. So really, really great experience.
The value of what you just said, that every interaction that we have with people across, like now, I've been with Access for 15 years. My last 11 years were specifically with the transition age youth population. But I think about the size of our organization and the reach of our organization. And when you were talking, I was thinking about how valuable it would be for each person that has the privilege of working for Access should get to hear that and recognize the impact that you have with each and every interaction throughout your day. It's something that you really have to treat with a lot of respect, and for you to come out with the feeling that you did of being heard and seen, supported, respected, that's what I hope every experience is for everybody that we serve. So, as I oversee programs, and something I stress is, especially after years in the field, sometimes I think about it. I don't know how many, probably not thousands, but hundreds of homes that I've been in at this point. I still am very intentional each time I go out to treat it like this may be the first time someone is opening their door to a stranger and to me. And I think it's important for especially a lot of our people who have been either in the field or our new folks, that if you're doing community-based work, this may be the 10th time in your day, but this may be the first time in someone else's life that they're opening the door, that they're either asking for help or saying? Is there something that you could provide to me? And so just the value of that and the message that I want, as we talk about the journey of access, like that continues to be the legacy of the work we do here.
You couldn't have said that better. And, there is truth to first impressions, matter. And, especially, when you're working with, when you're in a crisis situation, that first phone call, how you're met. And I think the big thing that Access does is, I think that for many of us, we feel uncomfortable with another person's distress. There's this feeling of like, okay, you're in distress. How do we, and you're not fixing anything, right? Like you're just coming alongside and you're guiding and you're respecting that person's individual set of circumstances. And you have that, Access, the way that you train your crisis workers and all of your staff, there's that component where you feel that anyone I've ever come across at Access Services, you get that feeling that they're comfortable with my distress. They're comfortable with what's happening, and they're going to really come alongside with me to help me figure it out, alongside my family. So it really so in that experience, it actually deepened my appreciation for Access Services and all that you do and all that you stand for.
One of the things, Mike, you and I talk about is, or we've talked about here, is the idea of at the end of the day, it's about humans helping humans, and sometimes we're on the receiving end of that help, sometimes we're in the offering end of it. But some of those values that we've talked about earlier are really values of human interaction and human, just what it means to be human. And I think one of the things I hope is abiding is our sense that what we're really doing is between. Usually it comes down to two people, like creating a space between two people where something good can happen in that space. People are listening well, people are respected, people are trusted, but there's something that's happening in that space, and that's what our staff have to offer folks. It's also what we have to offer each other in community. And so when we strengthen community, I think we're also talking about just creating spaces for people in the community to say, it's okay, you can be in this space with somebody, and what you have to offer is a really important gift to them. It may not be a service, but it's just really important. And where we create those spaces of mutuality, I think people thrive. And we become sort of a catalyst for how the community can help itself and help each other in between itself to just do well, be strong. Well, thank you guys for a great conversation, and here's to more years of Access, strengthening the community by staying true to the values and the ideas of what makes people human, and just continuing that work.
Thank you, and thanks for asking me to be on your show. It just was really special for me to be able to talk to you both and just reflect on all your good work and 50 years of really great success.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope that you enjoyed hearing from people who are strengthening our communities every day. Search for and follow us on your preferred streaming platform to hear future episodes.